Mike Nichols just has a great eye for this. He positions the camera a lot of times on people's reactions rather than what is going on in the scene.
I started questioning what the point of the story was. It's a fascinating film that I've never heard of before.
Jack Nicholson, Ann-Margret, Art Garfunkel, and Candice Bergen in Mike Nichols' Carnal Knowledge.
Welcome to Cal & Dave vs. the Machine Video Edition. You know, we are reviewing in depth on the podcast this week the film Carnal Knowledge by Mike Nichols. I just certainly have some feelings. Dave, what were your immediate thoughts on Carnal Knowledge?
It's good. It's fine. I think that it's shot really well and it's got this all-star cast, but in the end, there's something about it that, maybe I'm being naive. I felt gross.
Sure.
And then I started questioning what the point of the story was. But, as far as should you watch it, are there great performances? Are there very interesting themes? Yeah, it's a fascinating film that I've never heard of before. And I had to be educated about Nichols and May because I'm apparently too young to care.
I'm too young too, Dave. I'm younger than you are. I'm just like a nerd for this stuff. So, of course, I go back in time and watch all this stuff.
No one's arguing about that, yeah.
I didn't say anything, Kyle. I'm just... For me, what I find fascinating and what I kind of love about the 70s, at least the first 2/3 of the 70s, is that it's filled with these movies that are made for adults and for adult audiences and to really be reckoned with. This was, I think, the 8th highest grossing film in the United States in 1971. This would not even be close to the top 25, probably, if it were released today. It just would be drowned out by superheroes and fast cars and sequels and prequels and that whole thing.
Well, it was. Billy Jack won.
Sure. One of the top 10 was a sequel, but I'm just saying, like, that is now the whole top 10 rather than it being an anomaly. I enjoyed it for that point. I think that you're narrowing in on something, Dave, which I agree with, which is that I think this film is trying for something. It is going for this examination of why married men seem, at least in the 70s, seemingly hate women.
First Cindy. Oh, no, not Cindy. How about Sandy? How about Cindy and Sandy?
It seems to be like women are this ultimate get or like conquest that they're going for, but to actually have a real relationship with them takes work, and sometimes men just don't seem like they're interested in doing it. Now, that could be a whole psychoanalyzation of Mike Nichols, because he had like 4 or 5 relationships by this time and 2 children. So it's interesting that this was something that he was going towards. Now, I don't think what works in this movie is the fact that you have the same actors portraying these characters over 30 years, because in no reality does Jack Nicholson in 1971 look like he's a college student. So you do have to contend with that.
Although, to be fair, he looks exactly the same right now. So maybe he was born that way.
Not exactly the same.
With the eyebrow up.
The actors do a good job. And the other great thing, again, Mike Nichols just has a great eye for this, is that he positions the camera a lot of times on people's reactions rather than what is going on in the scene. There's this beautiful scene where it literally is just focused on Candice Bergen while this like joking and argument is happening around her, and you don't even see the other people. You just see her reacting. You see who she likes, who doesn't like, just through eye movement. And I think it's just a brilliant way to construct that scene, because you know all this stuff and understand how the whole relationships are playing out without anyone having to explicitly say what's going on. And I think that's pretty cool.
If you watch this on iTunes, this is probably the best restoration we've ever seen. It is gorgeous. And to your point, Kyle, from a mastery of directing, I mean, again, I don't know who his DP is, but the lighting in this thing and how they frame it's beautiful. It's clearly set up either meant to be a play or as created by people who love the theater. So there's a sense that this is on a stage, and I think it might have worked better that way, as many films we're finding out. I think there's so much overlap at this stage of Hollywood that I feel like some of this would work better in a stage.
That's the thing that I kind of repeatedly bring up, I think, which is the difference between the stage and film, which is that you can get away with theatricality and unreality a little bit easier on the stage. It's like, okay, so this guy is portraying a 5-year-old kid and now he's growing up, and it's like, okay, I can interpret that, I get it, whatever. In a movie, because it's like we're so up close to them, it's like, no, like I need there to be not that much theatricality in it. I kind of need to see them progressing through time, whether it's like casting a different actor or using old age makeup or whatever it happens to be. That just is the fundamental difference between theater and in the movies, what we can suspend our disbelief for.
The final point that you brought up, Kyle, which is I have this assumption, I'm not always correct, about when a script or a piece has been written by a man. And this This is that toxic masculinity problem where this is written by a man. I think it's allegedly supposed to be satirical about men's relationships with women, but it just comes off almost violent. And when I leave this film, because there's no redemption arc, there's no hero, there's no lesson learned. So if you're an intellectual in the 70s, you're supposed to maybe leave the theater, analyze Jack's character, and just be like, well, at least I'm not him, or here's different ways that I would have approached this. But for me watching it, I just feel like they're almost worshiping. I mean, he's broken, but they just keep pounding your face with him showing off about his broken life. There is that poignant scene at the end where it's great metaphor, like you said. Mike Nichols shoes this perfectly with Rita Moreno. Is she trying to get him off or get his ego off? And I think that is supposed to be the big tail end of it, but it was just left me a little bit unsatisfied.
Well, and on the flip side, I was completely satisfied. I had a cigarette after, actually. I think that this is something that intellectually I can engage with, and that is what I find fascinating about it. I don't really like any of the men that are in this movie. To be frank, I don't know if I like anyone in this movie, men or women, but it goes places. It goes very brutal, not physically, but emotionally tormented throughout this entire thing. And it is the first American movie to ever use the C word. So that's a fun little fun fact about this movie.
You know, we should bring is it an etymologist or a linguist to figure out why that word has become so reviled. But in England,
all the time. Well, Australia too. It's like you call your friends that.
Hey, what's wrong with us?
I don't
Prudes.
know. Well, let me list the ways. We're going to be talking about Carnal Knowledge in much more depth on the podcast that's released anywhere you get podcasts. Kyle and Dave versus the Machine.
Ready for your jack attack?
What kind of man am I?
I don't know what that means.
It's time to
figure it out.
Jack off? No, that doesn't work.
Well, I'll leave that in just because it's relevant to this film. Because he can't, can he?
He cannot.
Got you hot.
Something has to.